What's on your mind, Xander?
I'm currently seeking new research opportunities. I hear the Ordinators out of Necrom are looking for assistance clearing dungeons both in the region and in Apocrypha. Could be fruitful.
Funny you should mention that. I've got a job I'm doing for the Ordinators. You should come along. Hey guys, Centurion here at ESO Vault along with my friend Xander. Today I've got a very traditional Stamsorc for you. And by traditional I mean that this build gets its damage almost entirely from skills and the gear sets buff the damage of the skills. This video marks a return to form with the focus again being on the 3 R's. Readily available gear, reproducible rotations, and reachable DPS. The last several videos featured gear that could be pretty difficult to obtain. That's not the case this time. I am using a mythic item and a Maelstrom two-handed sword, but those pieces are optional. This build isn't gear driven at all, and as a matter of fact, you can literally use any gear that you have available. Alright, let's take a look at the character sheet for the build.
You wish to engage in badinage?
Bada what? Look, I don't even know what that is. I just want to talk about the build. Looking at the character sheet, you can see that this is one of several Dark Elf characters that I have. They're a top damage dealer race, and I'll put the hierarchy up on your screen if you're interested in which races are the best. Dark Elf has bonuses to magicka and stamina and weapon and spell damage. They also have extra fire resistance, which makes them good if I'm running a vampire. I'm using lava foot soup and salt rice here for stamina and stamina recovery. If I want a little more health, the cheap alternative is dubious Camoran Throne. The expensive and only slightly better alternative is Artaeum Takeaway Broth. My Mundus Stone is the Thief, which increases critical chance. Up top I have all 64 points in stamina. I wind up with 18,000 points of health and 36,000 points of stamina. Stamina recovery is high on this build at 1800, so I can definitely get away with the food that has less recovery. Weapon damage is at 4800 and crit is at 38%. Those go up in combat of course, but this shows you what the base values are. This build uses potions of weapon power as most builds do, so be sure to level the alchemy skill line. And you need that even if you aren't going to make your own potions, so unfortunately there's no shortcut there. I'll spare you a lengthy rant about penetration, but I will say that you only need to fiddle with that number if you're A, in a Bleeding Edge Trials group, or B, you're doing a PvP build. Alright, let's move on from the character sheet. Oh, mushroom.
Ew! Be sure to wash your hands.
I always forget that you hate these things. I'm really surprised you like Fargrave. I mean, there are mushrooms all over. They're in the shops, they're in stalls on the street, everywhere. Before I talk about individual skills, I want to say that this is a 2-bar build, and that means it involves light attack weaving. Don't stress if you're not good at that. I'm not particularly good at it either. Just do as well as you can with it and don't lose sleep over light attacks that don't register. The build uses a static rotation, and that involves using the skills in a set order and simply repeating that order until the enemy is dead. One of the things that helps me with my rotations is that I always press the buttons in pretty much the same order on every character. I slot the skills according to where I want them to be in my rotation. I don't slot the skills randomly and then change my button presses depending on the skill I want to use. The button presses are always in the same basic order. And skills that appear in multiple builds are often in the same slot on every build. For example, I almost always have my healing skill on the same button. When I need a heal, my fingers know where to find it every time. Also, my spammable attack, whatever it may be on a given build, is always on the same button. Of course, I play with an Xbox controller on PC. Odds are that's not how you play, but the logic remains the same. I digressed a little, but that's something that I've been wanting to mention for a while. I always start my rotation on the back bar, and that's a great sword. The first skill I use is Critical Surge. This sorcerer skill gives me major sorcery, which I don't need because I'm using potions, but it also heals me for 3,000 points once per second as long as I'm doing damage. This is a ton of healing, and as long as I can keep Crit Surge active, it's hard to die. I'm going to pre-buff with this before every fight and keep it going. I like to use an add-on called Buff Timers that shows when Crit Surge is about to expire. You can actually set that add-on to show any buff. Next I activate Hurricane, which is a signature sorcerer skill. Increasing area damage over time is its main effect, but this skill also increases my armor by 5,000 points and increases my movement speed by 15%. Now that I'm buffed up, I'm going to charge my enemy using the Stampede skill from the two-handed skill line. Stampede does bleed damage over time and increases my weapon damage if I have the right trait and enchantment on my sword. More on that in the gear section. Now I'm going to use one of the new scribed skills, Shocking Burst. This is my custom version of the Soul Burst Grimoire. This skill does instant shock damage in an area around me, shock damage over time, and gives me minor courage. Sorcerers have a 5% bonus to physical and shock damage. Because I want to take a little pressure off my stamina pool, shock damage is better than physical damage here. Now I cast Razor Caltrops at my enemy's feet. Razor Caltrops does damage over time and applies major breach to enemies in the area, reducing their armor by 5,000 points. Razor Caltrops comes from the Assault skill line and will require some time spent PvPing to get the skill. There's one more skill on this bar, and that's my ultimate, which is the Charged Storm Atronach. For single target damage, the Greater Storm Atro used to be the hands down winner. Thanks to changes to the concussion status effect, I can't really tell much of a difference between these two skills. And because single target damage is close here, I'm going to go with the Charged Atro because of its ability to damage multiple targets in the area. Murphy's Law says that if there's more than one target, the Greater Atro will hit the wrong one. The only drawback of the Atro is that it's stationary, but in fights where a boss has high mobility, I just use my ultimate from my other bar. Alright, let's look at that other bar, which is dual wield daggers. The first thing I use on this bar is Deadly Cloak from the dual wield skill line. This skill does area damage around me and reduces my damage taken from AoEs by 20%. The damage output from this is very strong, so try to always make room for this on your bar when you're dual wielding. Now I use Barb Trap from the Fighters Guild skill line. This skill provides minor force, increases my weapon damage by 3%, and does bleed damage over time. That triple threat makes this a hard skill to pass up, even when minor force isn't needed. Now I use one of the new scribe skills, Bloody Knife. My version of this new skill does instant bleed damage, gives me minor berserk, increasing my damage by 5%, and activates the Ruffian passive for 6 seconds. Ruffian buffs my dual wield attacks by 15%. Now that Ruffian is active, I'm going to use my spammable attack. The dual wield skill Rapid Strikes is my spammable, and I'm going to use that 10 times in a row. After using Rapid Strikes, I return to my other skill bar and start all over again. You probably noticed that I didn't use the next skill, which is Bound Armaments. Bound Armaments causes a magic dagger to appear with each light attack up to a maximum of 4. The idea is that when I have 4 daggers, I can fire them by pressing the button for that skill, doing a large amount of damage. Nope, not this guy. I'm just going to let them sit there. And that's because they tend to mess up my rhythm with Rapid Strikes. What I like to do is use Bound Armaments situationally. In real fights, there are plenty of opportunities to fire the daggers, but I don't use them in the sample fight coming up. I have Bound Armaments slotted because just slotting it gives me 8% more stamina. Having more stamina increases damage because this is equivalent to having a couple hundred more weapon damage. On top of that, my weapon damage is increased by 2% for each sorcerer skill that I slot. This comes from the Expert Mage Sorcerer passive. So in the end analysis, this beats out slotting something like Camouflage Hunter here. The only skill left on this bar is Flawless Dawnbreaker, which provides another 3% boost to weapon damage. And it's a good backup ultimate for enemies that move too quickly for the Storm Atro. Alright, that's it for skills. Time to put it all together. So the build did 56,000 points of damage per second, with most of that being physical or shock damage. And that's good because sorcerers have a 5% bonus to those two damage types. The chart shows a lot of very straightforward damage without much going on in the way of status effects. They're a pretty small component of damage on this build. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the gear. What do you think so far?
Early days yet in this collaboration, but I have high hopes, cohort.
No, not us. The build. Never mind. On my front bar I have 2 Order's Wrath daggers. The main hand is Nirnhoned with a poison enchantment, and the offhand is charged with a fire enchantment. Go to the high aisle and craft this set or have somebody craft it for you. If you need an easy to get set that's still really powerful, stop looking, this is it. On the back bar I have the Maelstrom's Perfected Greatsword. This is the only piece of gear that's difficult to get on this build, and it's optional. If you don't have this, craft an Order's Wrath Greatsword. You won't get the buff to rapid strikes that the Maelstrom sword provides, but you can still buff your weapon damage if the sword is in the infused trait and has a weapon damage enchantment. My monster helm on this build is Stormfist. If you're just looking for flat damage that's easy to proc, Stormfist is king. Stormfist does shock and physical damage and works great on a sorcerer. Since I have a channeled spammable attack and a lot of damage over time skills, a 5-piece set that will work really great is Deadly Strike. You guys have seen me use this in a lot of builds and it can be pretty hard to beat. Deadly Strike comes from Cyrodiil. Go there and farm alliance points to buy it or just buy it from guild traders. I already told you there's no mythic items, so that's it for the gear. Body pieces are medium with the Divine's trait and the jewelry is bloodthirsty with weapon damage enchantments. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Champion points are pretty straightforward. In the blue tree, there's Deadly Aim, Thaumaturge, Wrathful Strikes, and Fighting Finesse. Well, since you brought it up, how do you feel about working together?
I've had many collaborators over the years, and you are one of them.
I don't know about how the other players feel, but you're kind of a jerk, and that business about not liking mushrooms is a real deal breaker. Our collaboration may be over at the end of this video. Well, that's it for today's Sorcerer build. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, help me out with the algorithm by hitting the like button. If you want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already subbed. I've got the usual fashion show at the end, followed by a fight. Well, that's all I've got today. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and enjoy your adventures in Tamriel.